We're going to take a walk down, nice and easy. We're representing the Ummah. We're representing the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's it. Nothing else. We don't need to cause a scene. We walk down, show force that we protect Blackburn and we're here for the community and for all colours. End of. Allahu Akbar. We're not having thugs and hooligans come around our town and causing trouble. You have to remember you're representing the whole of the Muslim Ummah here. You cause trouble now, yeah? This is what they want. Yeah? We stand our ground and that's it.
People came to this hotel in Rotherham yesterday not to protest, but to break, to burn, to hurt. Not demonstrators, criminals who smashed their way in and set fire to a building where asylum seekers live. Some staying here were so terrified they spent the night in Woodland.
It makes me sad to be English, really, because this is the kind of people all over the world are going to see of us in a way. So
none of this had to happen, basically. None of it had to happen. It's misinformation. That's what it is. And violence just is never the answer for these kinds of things.
I saw two little children right on that top there. They must have been, I'd say, 4 or 5 years old, little boy and little girl. And we were all trying to wave at them and send heart signs, because what else could we do?
So far, the government has rejected suggestions to recall Parliament and to deploy the army. This happened in the new Defence Secretary's constituency.
This is devastating. This was an area that was seized with shock and fear throughout yesterday. It's the police's responsibility to respond first, and currently they've got the means to do it.
The warning to rioters is that they will pay a price.
If you were there, we will find you, and you will be held accountable for your part in yesterday's violence. To our local communities, yesterday was a dark day, and we know this was felt across our county.
When riots spread from the capital in 2011, 3,000 people were arrested and more than a third went to jail, many with long sentences. The criminal justice system and the prisons are more stretched now. It will be harder to do. But the man who was chief prosecutor then is now Prime Minister.
We'll ramp up criminal justice. There have already been hundreds of arrests. Some have appeared in court this morning. I've asked for early consideration of the earliest naming and identification of those involved in the process, who will feel the full force of the law.
This is the new government's first big domestic test, their first Cobra meeting, which ended with the Met's chief Tetchley grabbing a Sky News microphone. These are tense times. Here in Huddersfield, just a few social media posts from apparent far-right activists caused police to release a public warning and increase their presence at the train station. What's happening across Britain isn't yet on the scale of the 2011 riots in terms of the number of people involved, but one factor makes it already worse: human targets, the fact that this is fuelled by intolerance. Fearing trouble, local Asian businesses closed in Huddersfield. Some Asian men travelled here from other towns, ready to confront any protest. This man, who didn't want his face shown, came from Leeds.
We don't want this. This is our country just as much as it is theirs. And, Muslims are not bad. Our religion, Islam, it's not bad. We're good people. We've got to live here, and our children have got to grow up here, and we don't want this for them. We're not in a war zone, This is Britain, And, if this last week it has felt like a war zone, yeah, it's like I say, it's very heightened. People are really scared.
Already, Middlesbrough and other towns have seen Asian and far-right nationalists fighting on the streets. And in so many other places, communities are on edge. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Government of the people, by the people. So democracies are faced with problems, and I'm not saying these problems other forms of governance do not face. Like, for instance, in Swaziland, they do have riots, they do have people who are inside the monarchy, they still fight for free determination, and so I'm not saying this happens in democracies, but in a democracy, people call it political terms like social contracts, but what I've noticed is that no matter how wrong people are, no matter how Other people use words like nanny state, a state that tells people what to do. Don't drink this, this is good. People want to determine themselves. People want to take their own decisions, even if they are wrong. A perfect example would be liquor and cigarette. To an extreme, of course, it's controlled. But people know these things are dangerous, but they still consume them in amounts that are unreasonable. But so what I'm getting at is these riots. These riots, I mean, the leaders of England are calling it far-right tendencies. Well, far-right or far-left, it doesn't matter. What matters is the people in England want that thing. And if someone will come and sponsor these riots. Julius Malema calls it unled revolutions. July unrest in Durban happened. People are, what do I say? People will always get what they want. It may not be now. You may suppress them. Apartheid was a suppression, but it fell. The Berlin Wall fell. No matter how much you teach people, see, Chandima, I'm abusing that name because I can't pronounce it. Chidamma. She's a South African. I mean, clearly she's South African. I've not seen her ID, but when I listen to the story, she's a South African. What matters is what people consider her. And of course, it's true. She's of parents who are not blah, 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 blah. That case is parked. And you'll give many examples of she's more South African than other people who are embraced as South African. But she's still not accepted by the people. And the people are wrong. But they don't like it when we tell them they are wrong. But this is what they want. Donald Trump is a bad man. But Americans want him. Jacob Zuma went into a campaign that is unlike any other because he spoke about Zulu boy. People said, no, he's wrong. He's doing ethnic mobilization. But people loved him. And he's still by far the most popular political figure in South Africa. But the media sold us this idea that this guy is good, this guy is bad. I don't like Jacob Zuma myself, but I don't have to love him to tell you that he's a great leader. It's almost like I want presidents who I love. No, it's not about me loving that president. It's about the effectiveness of the president. So in England, those guys are saying this is what they want. This is, they say the country is full. They do not want immigrants. They say their country, they say they need to breathe. They say their lives matter, Irish lives matter. These guys are saying the houses that you are housing asylum seekers and immigrants, you could actually take our homeless people and put them there. These are the people in Europe, in England, who are doing what Donald Trump is doing. Make America great again. That's a MAGA of Donald Trump. So this thing of telling people how wrong they are, hey guys, you are wrong, you must not, it's not helping. We are right to tell them they are wrong. But us telling them that they are wrong, it does not substitute the fact that they will still free determine. They will still tell us what is it that they want to do. Because I've realized that we somehow forget that democracy is government of the people, by the people. And sometimes we like to subjugate their feelings, even if they are wrong. But it's what they want. It is what they want. Someone could come and sponsor an idea. It sparks a flame. It becomes dangerous. That's how the world works. No matter how much we are telling them they are wrong, this is what they want. Unfortunately, people came to Africa. They took our resources. They went back to England and they locked the gate. They said they don't want us to go there. And we want to go back there. And I'm not talking about the Muslims that are hated there, because they do not want them. And you would see in my podcast, I speak as much less as possible not to dwell into the Palestine, the Gaza, and and the Israel, because I feel there are people who will speak about that because it affects them. I want to speak more about things that are from an African perspective. Those people in Europe do not like us. If we do not create homes for ourselves, because our leaders have massacred everything. There's this rationale, by the way, let me dwell on it. African that we meet and we speak to, they say our leaders, they're talking about Bo Mandela, Cyril Ramaphosa, all our politicians and leaders, they have business interest in African countries, and they are depleting resources in African countries, and this is why they are defending. You see, South African politicians will like say, no, we are not xenophobic, these people are not representing what we are not xenophobic. It's the same thing that the English leaders are doing, the politicians. They are saying those people who are doing those riots, they do not represent them. And people are saying, the reason you are saying so is because you've got business interest in Africa. You are milking Africa, and these people are now coming to England because you have made away their gem. They've got nowhere to run that was they run back to Europe. It's the same thing. Africans are telling us that the reason they are running away from their countries to come to South Africa is because our leaders have business interest in their countries. They've depleted resources, and that's why they come here. Whether they are right or wrong, it is what they say. And this is why it explains the riots. Mashani, politically incorrect. Let's leave it at that. Tell me what you feel about this and what is it that we must do as Africans regarding this matter of people, our people not being wanted anywhere in the world. Anywhere. Thank you, Mashani.
Racial society derived from their sort of brief enthusiasm for globalisation. And he says ethnic identities, of which being British was framed as one among many, were to be embraced within the parameters of the newly multicultural state, and immigrations were lifted to achieve this goal. Paradoxically, Tony Blair now says that was all a bit of a mistake.
Well, it was a huge error, wasn't it? I think that's pretty safe to say. And I think that this idea of creating a sort of multicultural identitarian state where you have racial and religious identity politics increasing within ethnic minority communities, I've always warned against that. Firstly, because I think that is deeply illiberal, and I ultimately support a solid, civic, inclusive British national identity in order to bind that diversity together. But the real worry was always that there would be a counter-development of a racial identity politics within the white British majority. And Mike, I have to say that over the past week, if you take Southport, for example, that was being framed by people, by some people, in racial terms. And I think that's a very worrying development. So you can see that with this, the Hare Hill riots, the protests following the Manchester Airport incident, they had a decidedly tribal character. And now I think what we're seeing is that the response to the Southport child killings, that's also taking on a decidedly tribal character. And that's a very important and a very worrying development in terms of race relations.
And people saw during the Hare Hills riots in Leeds and during those disturbances in Rochdale because of what happened at Manchester Airport, they saw the police again operating very differently to the way they're operating right now. And also we saw in Bolton yesterday, groups, gangs of young Asian men, Muslims we believe, coming out to sort of fight white people and looking for white people and going around, you know, being violent towards them. But again, nothing from Keir Starmer on that.
Well, I thought that the Prime Minister is absolutely right to call out and say that far-right thuggery within these aren't protests, these are violent riots that we're referring to. That needs to, that's kind of criminal behaviour needs to meet the full force of the law. But I think with these last two interventions, he struck the wrong tone. And I think actually through the speeches, he has risked consolidating those views that there is two-tier governance in modern Britain. And I think in a society as ethnically, racially and religiously diverse as ours, you cannot have two-tier governance. It's a fundamental threat to social cohesion and public security in itself. And I think that what we need to do, we need to see how our law enforcement agencies work. It has to be very clear that no group in British society can be the beneficiary of preferential treatment when it comes to matters of law and order. And I think crucially, we need to have a very serious discussion in terms of the kind of direction the country takes, especially when it comes to very sensitive matters of immigration, integration and identity.
Yes, but again, that piece of the Times talks about how the reason part of this resentment has built up over time by many people who consider themselves to be white working class is because none of these issues have been talked about. None of these problems have been discussed. None of these problems have even been named, you know. He talks about how, you know, people get referred to as community leaders as opposed to what they actually are. You know, communities get referred to as communities as opposed to what they actually are. You know, there's been this kind of willful misdirection, if you like, by a lot of people, you know, in the liberal kind of left area of politics and by politicians and in some ways by parts of the media as well.
No, absolutely. And I think that along with that misdirection, there have been plenty of broken promises as well. And I have to say that the last Conservative government specialised in broken promises, especially when it came to matters of immigration and asylum. The Conservative Party, manifesto after manifesto, the party pledged to reduce levels of immigration. We're left with unprecedented levels of immigration under the last government. There was also this pledge to stop the boats. The small boats emergency on the English south coast is ongoing. And I think the point I'd make is that if you have major political parties continuing to make promises, especially in their manifestos, and those promises are broken, and that there's a huge gap between the rhetoric and policy delivery, then that's going to undermine public confidence in the liberal democratic system. And I have to say, when you have those rock bottom levels of political trust, that is not ideal at all from a public security perspective, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, so how do you see this all ending, and when does it end?
Well, I'd like it to end as soon as possible, like the vast majority of the country, I suspect. I think that the worry is that I feel that our police forces, many of them are severely under-resourced. You've seen, Mike, that there's been the gutting of neighbourhood policing. You're talking there with your last guest, where there's almost been the de facto decriminalisation of many crimes because of that gutting of neighbourhood policing. And I think that it was a very bad message that the new government sent when it talked about releasing prisoners prematurely to free up space in the criminal justice, in the prison estate. And I think that what we really need to talk about here is that we have to have those systems, whether it's policing, criminal justice, they need to be very well resourced and well funded. And I think that critically, I think that in terms of what we've seen in terms of violent riots, they need to be swift prosecutions, because that needs to send a very clear message that however angry you are about particular situations in this country,
meaning that we are doing any wrong thing with the country, with the people over here, you know. Everyone deserves to have a beautiful life, a peaceful life. We just want to have this over here, you know.
Yeah, I feel very stressed, and it's very distressing moment in our life. We've never seen this kind of far-right group active against anti-immigrant. So we are living fear and anxiety. This could be, anything could happen to us, and we are living fear.
But I think what you said about education is key. And a lot of people have been talking about the need of
the Muslim communities are terrorized. If I'm going to use the word, they are terrorized. They fear for their safety. They fear that they cannot go out. They fear.
The reports are saying horrific racist incidents have also occurred all across England just last week. That includes a mob beating up a black man and an Asian man being stabbed at a train station. According to police, at least 300 people across the UK have been arrested in connection with the riots, with at least 100 detained in London alone. Moreover, at least 50 police officers have been injured so far. Liverpool City Mayor says the violent disorder is less about the murders in Southport and more about local youths stirred up by social media.
Say there's a differential between what happened on Tuesday in Southport and what happened here. Definitely on Tuesday there were people bussed in from all over the country because we know that, because we see the travel patterns. This was more about local youths being stirred up by social media, by that communication of everybody, let's get together and all that, thinking it was a bit of fun, and purposely trying to stir up some sort of criminality in this area. And you know, I've been the MP for this area and I'm very, very supportive of the people and the communities, but this was the community inflicting misery on the community.
Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has described the attack on hotels as far-right thuggery. Addressing the nation, the Prime Minister vowed to end the mayhem and take action against people inciting the riots online and offline.
Utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. If you target people because of the colour of their skin or their faith, then that is far right, and I'm prepared to say so. But it doesn't matter what apparent motivation there is. This is violence, it is not protest. It doesn't matter what the motivation is. The motivation for the vast majority of people in this
house, asylum seekers throwing projectiles at the police, and there's a very real sense here that rather than the scene sort of clearing up and the situation de-escalating, there are people still joining. There's scorched grass, there are officers with their riot shields up behind me. So just to kind of give you a bit of a better sense on the lay of the land, and I know we can't get in that close because we're on an iPhone, which is the best thing to film on in this situation, but there are police officers in that crowd on the other side, and then a group of onlookers. And every time the police head in this direction in vehicles, they are being chased away from the scene. I saw a police car about 5 minutes ago reversing the opposite direction. So as I have said, it's clear that they are being targeted. Over the course of the day, we've seen those pictures of people trying to gain entry into that Holiday Inn Express, which you know housed asylum seekers, people setting fire to that. There is a flame behind me as well, Gillian. There is a police helicopter overhead also, in a scene that doesn't look like it's de-escalating anytime soon. In fact, some people in the last hour have joined the rioting.
Shinge, if you feel safe to carry on, just a couple more questions. You just said there that people are seemingly joining the rioters, so that the crowds are swelling. There's no sign that people are starting to leave as the day is drawing to a close.
So on this side, at least, in the last 30 minutes, people joined, but this is quite a complex situation with the police cordoning off a number of entrances to the hotel. So this was one of them. And here, when we arrived, which is just over an hour ago now, the police were saying that it's the other side where they were having issues. And then suddenly, as I think is the case with so many of these situations, there was a development and they had to move. So officers who had stopped had to pick up their riot gear and head in the direction of a group who were approaching them. That group had projectiles, that group had planks of wood, they had stones. And that gave you the sense that this is a fast-moving situation in which at points, perhaps, there is what seems to be de-escalation, but then the crowd swelled a little bit. So at this point, I'd say there's around 100 or so people gathered, but the mood has shifted quickly in the evening while we've been here. I don't know if we can sort of walk back a little and get in a little bit closer for you, but as you can see, there's a group behind me, and that group, I don't think you probably get it on the small phone camera we're having to use, are surrounding a group of police officers, much like the pictures we've seen over the course of the day at the other side of the Holiday Inn. You have police officers who seem outnumbered and crowds of people around them. It seems to have quietened down in the last 10 or 15 minutes, but the incitement seems to happen when there's a police car heading in this direction and the group of people see them.